Greetings, YouTube. As I've mentioned recently, I have been reading through 5th edition, and yeah, I know I have not done a few full video on the Player's Handbook and the DM's Guide and the Monster Manual, but I just recently finished reading the Monster Manual, and I'm now reading a PDF dealing with converting every single monster in the Monster Manual into a playable race, playable species. So yeah, that's quite interesting. I'm enjoying myself reading that. It's quite interesting to see how somebody else can take that idea and run with it and how they view how an animal or a monster should be converted into a playable species. It's kind of interesting. And the fact that they have the design notes at the end of every single entry is quite nice. I like being able to immediately reference them within the description as opposed to having to go in the back, which would be so of the PDF would be so annoying. But one of the things I noticed when I'm looking at the animals in 5th edition are some glaring things that really confuse me. First of all, 5th edition does away with low light vision, and this makes zero sense to me. So you either have normal vision or dark vision now, and that holds true for animals. But here's the thing. Dark vision is only usable, really, in no light situations, in the Underdark. So if you are a species that lives beneath the earth, if you are a dwarf or a goblin or a kobold, one of those species, or one that hunts exclusively at night, in areas where that you are passing from the Underdark into the upper world and back again, dark vision makes perfect sense. But if you are a surface dwelling being, whether you are a hominid or an animal, and you have something other than standard human style vision, low light vision makes a hell of a lot of sense. I'm sure that you have seen, either in person or in pictures, cat eyes that glow. They glow because there's reflectors in the back of their eyes. So their eyes are able to capture more of the available light, which is why their night vision is somewhere between 6 and 10 times better than humans. I just tend to use 8 as a nice round number. So a cat, on average, has vision 8 times better in low light conditions than you do. There's not going to be a lot of color involved in that, but they're still going to be able to see their environment a hell of a lot better than you can. And sadly, I have retinopathy, which is where I had bleeding in my retinas. So they had to go in there with lasers and argon laser and burn the bleeding, cauterize it. And in doing so, they destroyed my night vision, which is very depressing to me because at one time I had incredibly good night vision. I could walk around in the dark and never have to worry about it. I had very good night vision. I also had excellent contrast vision, and I no longer have that because of the retinopathy and the resulting laser surgery. So yeah, don't get retinopathy. It's no fun, and it's the most painful thing I've ever lived through, having laser surgery in your eyes. But low light vision makes sense in the real world. Dark vision doesn't for animals. Dark vision goes to 60, or if you're having exceptional dark vision, 120 feet. That's a really small bubble to live in. In the Underdark, that's okay because it's going to be uncommon to have any area that's going to have an open space more than that. You're in the Underdark. You're in tunnels and caves and such. So yeah, that's okay. Yeah, that makes sense. It has limitations to it. It's black and white only. There's no color. And you can read in it. You can read with it. That's not real world. If I put you or me into a completely lightless room, we're blind. And if you could see in that room with absolutely no light, that's magic. That's dark vision. The animals don't have that. They just have better low light vision. And that makes sense for elves who are surface dwelling. Hell, I have my orcs have low light vision because they're not cave dwelling. Maybe the goblins are, and the goblinoids, larger races, the bugbear and hobgoblin, they're all genetically related to the goblins. They're all goblinoids. So okay, I got no problem with them having dark vision. Dwarves, gnomes, okay, I got no problem with that. But elves? Orcs? No, they live on the surface. Why the heck would they have dark vision? Low light vision makes a heck of a lot more sense. And I always use a rule of thumb when it comes to low light vision that starlight is equal to moonlight and moonlight is equal to daylight. So for an elf or an orc in my world, being outside at night under moonlight is pretty much the same as being outside in the daytime. You just have good vision. And that means that you are able to, operate either tactically as an offensive or defensive manner anytime you want to. And it makes sense that animals would have low light vision because that's what they have in the real world. So yeah, that baffled me. Still does. I would have to retcon that. I would have to tweak 5th edition in that regard. I would have to put low light vision back into the game because it's where it belongs. I understand why they did it. Simplification has its place, but in this case, I think they went too far. They took back something that I don't think they should have. Then comes the matter of the animals themselves. And the authors of the animal section, I don't know if it's different than the authors of the monster section or the same folks, I'm not positive, but they did reveal to me that they do not understand the difference between poisonous and venomous. And there is a distinction. If something is poisonous, it's dangerous if you bite it. If something is venomous, it is dangerous if it bites you or stings you. So they called snakes poisonous. Now, in the real world, there are no poisonous snakes. You can eat snake meat. It's not going to hurt you. I hear it tastes like chicken. But if a snake that is venomous bites you, bingo, you got a problem. So yeah, they don't seem to understand that animals are venomous, that have stings, stingers, and bites that deliver a poison, as opposed to being poisonous means it's dangerous if you consume it, or I guess in a fantasy setting where you breathe it in certain types of gases and things like that. So yeah, that bugged me. That was showing me that the people that were writing this section about animals didn't actually know even a passing degree of colloquial knowledge about animals, which is par for the course because fantasy writers have shown me many times in the past that they have never worn armor, never picked up a weapon, and for the most part never used any kind of skill that they're talking about, which irritates me. If you don't know something, talk to someone that does before you start writing things down that are going to from a point of authority. If you're writing from a position of authority and you are not, find someone who is, have them look over your work. I know it's extra test steps. Tough. But the thing that really baffles me the most about the animal section is the intelligence. Now, some in the past, animals were anything under 2 or lower was an animal or an insect or mindless. Those were the 3 categories. You had 2, 1, 0. Okay? So 2 was a big bucket of all the animals out there that weren't sapient, that weren't monstrous sapient beings. Anything under 3 is non-sapient. It's sentient, but not sapient. 1 was considered, for most insects were like 1, particularly the larger ones. And then 0 was for the things that had absolutely no minds whatsoever. They were utterly mindless. And I think that was a pretty good division. That 3, 2, 1, 0, those 4 categories of you're in the 3 and up zone, you're sapient. If you're 2, you're an animal. If you're 1, you're probably an insectoid. And if you're 0, you're even less than that. Maybe you're some kind of ambulatory fungus or something. Who knows? But those were categories that made perfect sense to me. Now, I have argued in the past that there are certain animals that should have had higher intelligences. And that actually is reflected in 5th edition. There are animals that have higher intelligences. And some of them make sense. The great apes, whales, elephants. I would also probably extend that to some of the monkeys and maybe even some of the brighter birds like the corvids and parrots. We've taught parrots to do math. Okay, so yes, I think that they should probably have more than a 2 intelligence. In the great apes, they should probably be, in the 4 to 5 range. The elephants should probably be in the same range as well, as so should the whales, the cetaceans. So yeah, having certain animals, remember, and we're animals, be above 2 makes perfect sense. And 5th edition does reflect that. I would have to go back and make sure that I agree with all the numbers they gave them, but they did give them. And they also have the great versions of some of them, like the great apes, like, Mighty Joe Young, King Kong kind of thing. Yeah, it makes sense that they're smart too, because they are. Not only are they great apes, but they're fantastical beasts. They don't exist in the real world. I know that Gigantopithecus is a real concept, but we have no idea how bright Gigantopithecus was. I'm probably figuring they're probably as bright as any of the modern great apes, so I would put them above a 2 as well. But there are some others in this section on animals that have higher intelligences than 2, and I can't fathom why. For example, the giant goat. Now, goats are traditionally small animals. So if you take a small animal and make it a medium-sized animal, which now makes it much more useful to say small races as steeds and things like that, which makes perfect sense. A large goat would be a perfect thing for a halfling or a gnome to use as a steed or a pack animal. Riding llamas are very common in campaigns I run. So that makes sense, having them in the game, but their intelligence went from 2 to 3. Why? There are lots of mammalian herd animals that don't have a 3. They have a 2 because they're animals. And even a moose, who is large, should have a 2. So why is changing a goat from a small to a medium-sized creature suddenly increase its intelligence? Yeah, I know you need magic to do that, but in the real world, we have medium-sized herd animals that have been domesticated that are in that category that aren't sapient. That baffles me. And there are a couple of other interests where in examples where there were like animals, like the predators seem to be smarter than their prey, except they aren't. Because if the predators had a 3 intelligence and animals only have a 2 intelligence, they would always win, and they don't. Having a jaguar or a lion have a 2 intelligence makes perfect sense, and having a gazelle or a goat have a 2 also makes perfect sense. These animals are the predator-prey concept. Sometimes they win, sometimes they lose. Sometimes the predator goes hungry, and sometimes they go home at the end of the day. But it's the intelligence scores for these animals are all over the place, and I don't understand why. You would think that if you're going to come up with a new edition, and there are things about 5th edition I think they did very well, you should make sure that somebody makes a pass over that and says, we nailed this in 3rd edition, 3.0. We had it down. Why are we changing it now? P1 and P2 did a better job. So in 5th edition, I understand that they've decided to kind of try to rope back in the OSR folks and the P1 folks into the D&D fold, and I understand why they did it. And then again, when I'll talk about the rules, I'll explain how I think they did it. But they figured this out a long time ago, 20-something years ago. So why are they now making it less structured and less sensible? Why? Why would you do that? Is anybody out there familiar with the team that produced this? Has anybody been talking about this on 5th edition discussions about why the animals have a varying degree of intelligences in a way that does not reflect reality at all? And just because you make something go from one size to another doesn't necessarily increase its intelligence. Now, the giant eagles in 5th edition are more intelligent, but they're supposed to be emulating the giant eagles from Tolkien, so yeah, I get that. And the giant owls have greater intelligence, but why? Have you ever talked to somebody that has worked with owls or owns an owl? Guess what? They're dumb. They're not smart. They aren't wise. They're just a raptor. They're good at their job, but they're not cracking a lot of calculus either. So making an owl go from small to medium or large should not change its intelligence. It's just a bigger bird. Now, more useful in some ways, and you can train owls, though I think owls as steeds would be probably difficult, because have you ever looked at the videos about owls? They're a lot of feather. There's not a lot of body in there. If you tried to sit on an owl, you're going to sink the feathers up to your bloody nipples. All right, you're gonna be, if you're sitting on a large owl, there's not going to be much of you visible. All right, I've seen owl videos where they've taken a cork from a wine bottle and hid it inside the feathers on an owl's chest. A lot of feathers, not a lot of body. But yeah, they're not bright. The whole owls are wise thing, bunch of BS propaganda come out of mythology. It has nothing to do with the real world. And since we're discussing animals, I think the real world should kind of guide our methods, don't you? Okay, I've blathered on enough about this. It baffles me. If anybody out there can tell me what the design concept behind having animals that have a greater than 2 intelligence that aren't like great apes or whales or elephants or some of the birds, I would love to hear it. And owls are not one of the birds that should have more than a 2 intelligence. They're not smart. Corvids, parrots, I can buy that. Owls, no. And how do you get a goat be smarter by going from a small to a medium size? If I use magic to increase the size of a halfling to a human size, do they get smarter? No, they don't. Same thing. Alrighty, so let's talk about animals in 5th edition. They kind of baffle me, and I am kind of confused. And I'm really looking forward to looking at the section on owls when they talk about turning them into a playable species, because that's going to be entertaining.